As long as there is internet, there is Bitcoin. There is a lot of misconception about Bitcoin itself. How secure is Bitcoin? Who's behind it? So we need to unlearn the traditional way of thinking to be able to learn Bitcoin. It's not a natural evolution.
I'm Barbara Lerins, and you are listening to Bitcoin-Kebab, the podcast from Bitcoin Bázis. Hello, George. Thank you so much for joining Bitcoin-Kebab today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's already start with our first question that we usually do. What was your orange pill moment?
Well, obviously, everyone who's into Bitcoin has an orange pill moment. And I think that, it's more like it starts with an orange pill process. Mm-hmm. And then there is like an inflection point. And that is the moment where, you're orange pilled, you're into Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And, I started, looking into a blockchain around 2016, 17. Mm-hmm. I was still like in the traditional investment field, looking into the technology, being more and more interested, still a little bit skeptic as to, what it has to offer and how, reliable it is. But slowly, as you get more into the technology, you start, playing around with all kind of cryptocurrencies. And then you start seeing like the flaws of many, and you start understanding better what is good, what is less good, until you just, dive into the weeds of Bitcoin. And this is where, after putting few hours into Bitcoin, you realize that, that's it. You got what you always needed in some way from a financial monetary perspective. And you become a Bitcoiner. Whether you're a Bitcoiner with some flexibility or Bitcoin maxi, this is where you become a Bitcoiner. Now, couple that with what happened in Lebanon. I used to be, living in Canada back then. And during that period, Lebanon went through a very tough crisis, right? So it's considered by the World Bank as the most severe crisis, economic, financial, and monetary, since the mid-19th century. So that also, accelerated my adoption of Bitcoin and my conviction that, Bitcoin is the solution. Bitcoin fixes it.
Do you remember, like, how did you stumble upon Bitcoin? Like, was it just an article, or was it a friend who introduced you to it? Or
exactly, so it's a friend actually. Mm-hmm. So we used to, he used to live abroad, like not in Canada, in France. We used to be a lot in contact, talking about, all kind of novelties, always, and he was already into the blockchain and started talking to me about it. He didn't have a finance background, so he was more like, describing what he, learned. And, I was able to give my perspective back then with the limited knowledge that I had. Right. So this is where I started in the field. And, it's been,
a
development since.
So you said that you were like more familiar with like the traditional financial markets because you did like portfolio management as well. Could you please like walk us through like what did you do before you get into crypto, and then like what was your journey until funding VaultKi?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as a private banker. So before being portfolio manager, understanding more like, the needs of clients, how they perceive, investment, how to advise them onto where to invest. Then, I evolved into becoming a asset manager in a way, more specifically a client portfolio manager. And this was my last gig in Canada. And this is during that period that I, started getting into Bitcoin. Now, obviously, portfolio management is all about traditional investments, whether it is like private or public securities or investments. But it's still very much into the traditional way of thinking that relies on intermediaries, and that is far from being the mindset of Bitcoin itself. So, transitioning into Bitcoin and eventually like all the security, the wallet security, was a process that, led to VaultKi. So eventually, while being in traditional investment and finance, as I told you earlier, the financial crisis in Lebanon happened, right? And being already invested in the technology, I started looking into some ways of self-custody, whether it is, cold storage or hot wallets. And it always went down to securing your seed phrase. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I needed to actually acquire something, a tool that allowed me to secure my seed phrase, right? I looked at what was available in the market, but wasn't really convinced that it covered all possible, if I may say, mitigatable risks. So all those that could be actually mitigated. There was something to be done. And this is where I went back to Lebanon, established VaultKi, and developed the product that, in our opinion, obviously, it is a well-rounded product that covers all possible mitigatable risks.
Can you tell me, like, what is VaultKi, as if I was like 5 years old or like very new to the market, and why do I need it? And then how do I use it? And
yes, of course. So basically, VaultKi is where you start your crypto journey. So in a nutshell, whenever one starts his or her crypto journey or Bitcoin journey, they open a wallet. Ideally, they go into the decentralized aspect of it, not through centralized exchanges. So the moment you open a wallet online, what you have is a key. That set of words, not letters, but words, 12 to 24 words that give you access to your crypto wallet, that allows you to sign your transactions so that the network knows that it's actually you and you can actually dispose of those cryptos. So since it is completely decentralized, there is no way to recover those keys that give you the ultimate power over that wallet or access to that wallet. There is no intermediary you can call or a reset button that allows you to get access back to your wallet if you lose those words, which means that you need to make sure that you secure completely and totally those 12 to 24 words. And this is where VaultKi comes in, to ensure that no mishaps happen, no hazard eventually compromise your access to your wallet and, compromise or make you lose those 12 to 24 words. So VaultKi is basically a product that is totally analog, meaning that it's not digital. There is no digital components, which makes it hack-proof. So we're going back here to the basics. It's a stainless steel product that is fireproof, waterproof, rust-proof, and corrosion-proof, hack-proof since it's totally offline, and many more things, which eventually I'll tell you about in a second. So the moment you acquire that product, which is made of stainless steel, you engrave on your VaultKi, on stainless steel, you engrave your seed phrase. So no matter what hazard you're exposed to, you're eventually covered and secured, right? Now, other features that also are included in VaultKi that lack in other products are, for example, the theft-proof or theft-resistant aspect. So we provide in the box, instead of one piece of VaultKi, but two pieces, which means that it allows you to split your seed phrase and put two halves in two different places. Because the moment you have your seed phrase stamped on your VaultKi, you need to secure it somewhere, put it somewhere that is safe, that nobody can see. But if it's in one place, it's centralized. If for some reason it's discovered by anyone, then your wallet is compromised. So splitting this key, putting two halves in two different places, allows you to mitigate the theft risk, right? So this is one aspect. Do you want me to continue on more of the features that we have, or how do you want to proceed with that?
I'm thinking actually so what's the difference between VaultKi and, for example, like a crypto tag?
Yes. So obviously, our competition has, very nice products, but we truly believe that through our iterations, while we developed the product, the VaultKi product, we mitigated much more risks. One of them is the theft-resistant risk, right? So splitting the seed phrase, not having one seed phrase on one piece that could be discovered and eventually compromise the wallet. The other thing is, for example, that we are completely, anonymous, in the sense that you can't find on our VaultKi product the VaultKi brand. which means that if someone finds the product and doesn't know that it is basically a key to a wallet, they will just see a bunch of letters and not know that it is actually the key to a wallet. But if VaultKi was on it, which is the case of most of our competitors, if not all, right? They can just Google it. So basically here we removed our own name to make sure that security is improved, right? So this is another thing. You have also the fact that it is a 3D design, not a flat design, which means that not only it is a patented design, unique design that looks like a blockchain, we made it in the shape of a blockchain, but also the fact that it is in 3D, at no single point in time when you put it on a flat, a table or a desk, you're not exposed to, for example, cameras or someone passing by if you're in a public space. Otherwise, if it is on a flat plate, let's say, the whole seed phrase is exposed, right? So you have all kind of different features that allow you to mitigate many more risks that, still exist in our competitors' product.
Yeah. No, I see that. So basically, like, the only thing that we have to be mindful of, that remembering, like, where did we put our vault keys?
Exactly. And what we actually encourage is, since you're splitting your seed phrase, you don't want to lose any half, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now you can have many copies. So you make many copies, at least 2, of your same seed phrase. So what happens is that you have always 2 halves that are similar, and still no single point of failure, meaning if one piece is found, you're still not exposed to being stolen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually sounds cool. So, like, do you see that, like, the future of self-custody is evolving in general? So, like, are we, like, shifting towards, like, keeping our own coins in our own wallet, or, like, are we more prone to keeping our money on exchanges?
So that's a very interesting question, because obviously the blockchain is based on decentralization, is based on self-custody. So in my mind, if I want to make a funny, if you want, or a kind of analogy, it's as if someone would buy a very luxurious car and then put it on the truck and then drive the truck, right? So it's kind of the same thing. So you are going into a decentralized technology. You are buying Bitcoin. You are acquiring Bitcoin. Now you're putting it back into a centralized place where you don't have self-custody. So you're not using it properly. So unfortunately, people usually have the tendency to go with convenience.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's more convenient to have your Bitcoins on a centralized exchange, a lot of people will stick to that, alternative. Despite the fact that we went through, the collapse of FTX, and billions of dollars, evaporated. Now
Yeah.
they're, recovering some of them, but still, people forget. So my hope is that eventually people get enough knowledge and awareness to keep their cryptocurrencies, off centralized exchanges. They can still use centralized exchanges for transactions, for convenience of transactions, etc. But at some point, whenever they want to just hold them, this is where they should transfer them to a wallet that is completely centralized and secured.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution of it will depend, I think, on the different applications and how easy will it be for the regular person who's not necessarily very tech savvy to actually use their cryptos in a decentralized way, and still, with the process being easy. So it's in the process. I think now history is being written, if I may say.
Do you have some kind of initiative? So many, like, newbies are entering the market nowadays, and of course, like, my first, like, thought would be just, like, using exchange as a wallet. Like, if the companies are, like, doing some kind of, like, extra education, maybe at some point, like, these newbies are gonna, like, end up at knowing more about self-custody, and it's gonna be, like, a shorter journey than, for example, it took me.
Okay, so if I understand well, what you mean is that, to go through the centralized exchange and with education eventually move on to a more decentralized approach?
Yeah. So
Yes,
do you do like some kind of education in terms of that? Like,
absolutely, absolutely. So so eventually, VaultKi is about, three pillars, if I may say. The first one being the product itself, the second one being education, and the third one will be consultancy. The third one would come down the road. But now we are actually partnering with universities, and our first Bitcoin course, with the first Bitcoin certificate of its kind, will be launched in one of the local major local universities here in Lebanon. A second one would be in March. So we're trying to just like expand education, raise awareness, especially that not only is it like the technology of the future, but also Lebanon went through a very difficult period of economic, financial, and monetary collapse. So it's very topical, and I think that it is important for people to just learn about it the proper way, even the technicalities behind it, in order to better embrace the technology and eventually adopt it in a decentralized way rather than centralized way.
can you tell us more about like the Lebanese crisis and what is going on since 2019?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure it was all over the news everywhere. So to say, in 2019, we had a very, very rough crisis, right? So the banks closed doors, and eventually people lost access to their savings. But just to give a little, intro to all this, Lebanon was not always like this. You know, back in the 50s, the 60s, Lebanon was considered the Switzerland of the Middle East. We had a very strong currency. Like one currency was back then worth two French francs. So it was stronger than the French currency, right? It was basically even considered a safe haven. But with time and with the start of the Lebanese war in 1975, things went south. At the end of that war in 1990, although Lebanon did not have any debt, but still the currency was not as stable as before, and eventually it collapsed to reach from $1 worth three Lebanese pounds to 3,000. So it was almost like a complete wipeout of the purchasing power in Lebanese pounds. Then it settled at 1,500 and fixed there for the next 30 years, 35 years, until 2019. Now, what happened in these years, Lebanon went into a lot of debt to do the reconstruction. And this is where the financial sector started collaborating more closely with the central bank that gave a lot of debt to the government. So they gave loans to the government. And unfortunately, because of a lack of proper management, to say the least, the money of depositors that were put at the central bank and then loaned to the government were squandered and basically disappeared and never given back to the depositors. So basically, you ended up having in your bank account a number that could be a few $1,000,000, but effectively, there were no fiat currency like dollars enough dollars in the market to actually repay those depositors. So this is where in 2019 banks closed doors and just said, you know what, there is a bank run right now. We can't give everyone their money. We're closing. And yeah,
It sounds very scary to me.
it was a shock. Nobody really understood what was happening. It was like, no, there's no way that it lasts. There will be a solution. But it's been 5 years with no money given back to depositors. Now you could have $1,000,000, $100 million in your bank account. You can always only retrieve like $300, $400 a month. And there was no capital control or real laws that were enacted or put in place to actually resolve the problem. So now it's complete mismanagement. There's a lot of corruption, unfortunately. And we're at the point in time where the people of Lebanon lost a lot of trust in their banking sector, obviously, and they're looking for alternatives. And that would bring us to Bitcoin, among other things.
What other things are also like assets that they use apart from Bitcoin? Because like Bitcoin would be, of course, like for us, it would be probably like the easiest choice. But
Right.
like I know that like the everyday person is probably like not their first thought.
Exactly. So obviously, first it was gold.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always in the Lebanese culture, you know, especially coming from our grandparents and great grandparents, you know, they always liked to stack gold. Gold was always for them safe haven. So people naturally went to gold. A lot went to real estate. And then many who were able to rebuild some kind of wealth with time just stacked their cash, their fiat money at home, which entails a lot of risks, obviously, right? So I believe that these are the three main ways in Lebanon, you know, between Bitcoin, fiat at home, and gold at home, that people eventually use to mitigate, if you want, their losses at the bank.
And are these like losses at the bank came with like hyperinflation as well?
Oh, absolutely. Because not only it was an economic collapse, it was also a financial collapse, as we said, but also a monetary collapse, meaning that the Lebanese pound that was fixed, as I told you, at the beginning of the 1990s at 1,500 Lebanese pound per dollar, reached 100,000 Lebanese pound per dollar. So 99% of the purchasing power of the Lebanese pound was wiped out.
So that's not enough that they close the bank on you. You don't access your money, but the money that is closed in the bank is also like inflating in an amount that is like it doesn't really matter if at some point you're gonna get it back or not.
Exactly. Now, some have deposits in dollars. So eventually, now they created a new term which is called lollars, so Lebanese dollars, which do not have the same value as a regular dollar, right? Because it is the old dollars pre-crisis. It's a scheme that is quite weird. But obviously, as you said, like whoever had Lebanese pounds and big amounts of Lebanese pounds, even if now they just recover them, they're going to be worth close to nothing. So they lost a lot of purchasing power for sure.
Could you please remind me, like, did you move back before or after the crisis?
So after the crisis, in 2022, the crisis started in 2019. And in 2022, this is where I decided to come back. One of the main reasons, obviously, there is the family reason, but also there is the mission of VaultKi as a product. You know what is behind it, and how with Bitcoin it provides such a solid offering for Lebanon. So for me, it was a no-brainer to actually start creating awareness in Lebanon during that period. Because the need was there, but the awareness was not. So as you said, for us, it was a no-brainer. Bitcoin is the way to go. But for many back then, they were used to the traditional financial system when they put their money at the bank and get a high interest rate because the risk of banks were higher than, so it was an easy way of just, sleeping on a cash amount at the bank and getting interest. So coming back here was more like to put in place an awareness program through a product that allows you to have self-custody that is ultra safe and education through Bitcoin. So what I like to put it in an equation, VaultKi plus Bitcoin would give you a secure financial freedom. So this is what we're about.
And also, like, so apart from the financial aspects, there is also like a war kind of situation going on in Lebanon. So definitely, like, if I'm writing my keys down on a piece of paper and then they bomb the house next to me, then it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. Unfortunately, these are the kind of situations where you realize that, there is no limits to what kind of hazards you could be exposed to, right? So oftentimes we say, yeah, these things happen to others, until unfortunately it could happen to anyone, right? So war is one of those risks, and of course, like whenever there is a fire because of bombing or other things, or even a whole building collapsing, having your seed phrase preserved on a hardware, like VaultKi, would preserve your seed phrase, and eventually you could recover your wealth. Now, on top of that, it is highly portable and, small, which means that if anyone needs to actually run away, they could take it with them very easily.
So if I want to buy Bitcoin in Lebanon, but I have no access to my fiat currency, or like in a very limited way, like what do I do? Where do I go?
So now Lebanon is very much a cash economy. Now the banking sector now is starting to, fix a little bit its structure, but we're still at a very early stage. We just elected a new president with a new prime minister, and we're hoping that things will evolve in a better direction. But for now, we're in a cash economy, which means that we rely mostly on peer-to-peer exchange. So someone else who has Bitcoins wants to sell them. I have cash. I just give them cash if I know the other person, and they send Bitcoins to my wallet. There are also agents. So, for example, someone who's like a foreign exchange office, if I may say, right, that are specialized in cryptocurrencies. So you would give them the cash, and they would give you in return your Bitcoins, right? So these are very common ways. Now you have also, of course, the centralized exchanges. So we can open centralized, accounts with centralized exchanges like Binance or others. But it's not easy to actually use cards, banking cards, local banking cards. So either we make a transfer, and sometimes they're turned down, or if we have an account abroad, then do that through those accounts that are not in Lebanon. But mostly it goes through agents in a cash way.
It doesn't sound so easy to actually access Bitcoin in general.
It's not, and this is one of the reasons why the adoption is slower. Because even if you want to buy Bitcoin, you always have this difficulty in finding the right way without making a mistake, since the technology is new to you, or so people just delay. And Bitcoin, as we can see, is not waiting for anyone. Right? Like prices are going up. Eventually, we're expecting prices to go up even further.
Do you see that maybe with the new prime minister, is there any chance that they are planning to adopt any cryptocurrency in their program?
So there is nothing that was said so far with regards to that. There is so much to do that sounds as being not a priority, although in my opinion it is, right? So instead of rebuilding a system that failed based on the traditional way, why not, since it collapsed anyway, the unfortunate event happened, why not start on a technology that is the technology of the future? But I think that for now there is nothing of that sort being prepared. Actually, I personally had some discussions with people in politics, did some presentations around that. It was quite well received, but there is a difference between starting to be aware and acting on it. And I think the delay unfortunately will not be in favor of Lebanon. But I hope that sooner than later there will be enough awareness for them to act on it. But there's nothing in perspective for now.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. And so this is the consultation part that you're gonna do with VaultKi, right? So you will try to push for some kind of wider adoption in Lebanon.
Exactly. I'm trying different avenues. So one of them obviously is my direct clients. Another one would be universities. Now I'm also talking to actually high schools to actually put that thought in in curriculums, or in the brain of younger kids who are more tech savvy, more willing to absorb a new technology, and eventually talk about it to their parents. So I'm trying or addressing different avenues. So the education part, the clients part, and eventually more official governmental aspects, but this one is still at the very early stage.
Do you see like any other currency than Bitcoin could actually like be useful for Lebanon, or like other blockchain solutions? So, for example, like I don't know, making like a Lebanese pound, but like
Yeah.
on the blockchain.
Well, it's eventually it could be possible. They talked about it at some point before the collapse, and it was in the cards. And
Mm-hmm.
then, happened what happened, and it was, put in on hold. So it could be. It could be. I don't know to what extent would it actually resolve the situation, because whether it is paper money or digital money, it will remain centralized and, with unlimited supply, potentially unlimited supply. So maybe it's going to be easier to transact in a digital way with a stable coin, a Lebanese pound stable coin, or something of that sort. But it won't resolve, the root of our problems, economic and financial problems and monetary problems in Lebanon, right? Now, alternatively, you would have, Bitcoin being used as a reserve. And we already have that culture of having a solid reserve in Lebanon, given
Mm-hmm.
that compared to the size of our country, we have a very high gold reserve,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so relatively, we're well equipped from a gold perspective. So given that we have that culture, Bitcoin could eventually also be adopted as a reserve currency, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's going to be more on a reactive basis than a proactive basis. Probably when the new administration in the U.S. is going to do what it's going to do. It says that's going to do great things with regards to Bitcoin. So let's see. Maybe we'll be
Yeah.
able to actually get inspired and move in that direction. Now, from a
Mm-hmm.
blockchain perspective, more widely, now obviously since the trust in the financial sector actually was lost,
Mm-hmm.
and for obviously good reasons as well. So having a trustless system, which is the blockchain, is quite useful, right? So how are we able to actually restart an economy without trust? Well, you go to a trustless system. And by trustless, obviously, we're not saying that we're not trusting anyone, but at the contrary, we're trusting everyone in the ecosystem that is the ecosystem of the blockchain. So basically, security is there, fraud is much, much more difficult, if not almost impossible. And there is also a traceability that allows for corruption to be tamed or to be, controlled.
Do you think that like these blockchain-based solutions then could actually like rebuild this trust in the financial system in general?
Well, it could be. It depends on how it's going to be implemented. And it's not going to be an easy thing because a lot of people today are, still need to have a kind of technology education, become a little bit more aware of the technology itself. So,
Mm-hmm.
so it could be at some point, but we're not there yet. Now, the good part, I would say, but where Lebanon is a fertile ground for a wider adoption, is that you have a lot of unbanked, right? Especially after the
Mm-hmm.
crisis. So the
Mm-hmm.
small depositors, were able to just take slowly those few $100s that the bank were allowing them to take. But then they closed their accounts once their few $1,000s that they had after 5 years were you know removed from their accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So now a
Mm-hmm.
lot are completely unbanked.
Mm-hmm.
So this technology could eventually be a solution for them to hold smaller amounts, because obviously they don't have the means to have larger than that, with no particularly high fees, no maintenance fees, no whatever fees that banks usually take. So it would allow them to stack money, eventually hold valuable assets like Bitcoin that will not lose in purchasing power, but to the contrary, are deflationary, that would increase in purchasing power, and serve them as a way to transact.
Yeah, like I can see that like the unbanked and also like smaller shops, maybe they could enable, for example, like lightning payments. But like right now, Bitcoin feels like too volatile to actually like do that.
Right. Right. So I think that this globally, not only in Lebanon, is going to be like phase two of, the adoption. The
Mm-hmm.
first phase right now is just for Bitcoin to just, gain enough traction. And once you would have enough people on board, hopefully with enough not too much concentration in specific wallets. So just the big boys stacking as many Bitcoins as possible, but like a wider, decentralized ownership of Bitcoin. This is where the volatility will start to be lower, especially when the price is going to be very high, right? It's going to be much more difficult for someone to just dump very high numbers of Bitcoin in the market to just, create some volatility, maybe and do some market manipulation, right? It's going to be much more stable given that the price or the total market cap is going to be more larger. And this is where adoption for smaller amounts will be much easier. It's not anymore going to be like a reserve currency or a way to stack your wealth, but also a way to transact without, being exposed to too much volatility along the way. But we're not there yet, in my opinion.
Do you have like a wild guess when we're gonna get there? Or like...
Well, yes, it's going to be hard to say. But if the Trump administration, they're coming with a lot of promises for the Bitcoin ecosystem, for regulations, for adoptions, for investments in the space. So I would say within the next 4 to 5 years, we should be able to really have tools that are easy enough for the average person to actually use Bitcoin without much understanding the technology in its depth and the intricacies of it. And we will have also an adoption from a, I would say, corporate perspective, or like shops and other businesses, for those people to actually find the utility in actually not owning Bitcoin to stack them, but also to use it, right? So I would say it will take definitely few years. 4 years is conservative, but it's going to be exponential.
Since you are exposed to like many newbies, what are the most common like misconceptions that you face during like these educational ventures?
Yeah. So a lot of people first, like from a security perspective, I would say they think that, for example, centralized exchanges are fine. They think also that, using any wallet application is also secure. And this is where, you have to really emphasize on the fact that you have to be very careful as to what you're using, when you're using, how long you're keeping your money there, all that. They have a misconception as to what really is the importance of the seed phrase. And actually, this is why I created on my website, on VaultKi's website, a series of articles. I call them From Blockchain to VaultKi. And it's 4 articles that takes you through the whole journey to be able to really understand what is the blockchain, what is decentralization, what is a seed phrase and self-custody, and then why VaultKi is your ultimate solution. So these are 3 main misconceptions from a security perspective. The other one is there's a lot of misconception about Bitcoin itself. Like from a security, like how secure is Bitcoin? Who's behind it? Eventually they could, whoever is behind Bitcoin could pop up at some point and say, I'm going to make it 42 million Bitcoin now in circulation, not 21. People think that this could happen and that, they're afraid of that, mystery around who is behind Bitcoin. So there is also the education part that comes in, where you have to actually share that kind of story around decentralization and how it's a whole community around the Bitcoin protocol, and any updates in the protocol should be in favor of everyone for them to actually vote in favor and actually implement any changes, etc. So we go back to the technical aspect of Bitcoin that is sometimes difficult to understand. But how I see the evolution in this, and very briefly, I think that when there will be enough people who are technically, open to understanding how Bitcoin functions, it will be almost like a no-brainer that Bitcoin is safe and nobody's gonna, come and disrupt it. Even if people won't really understand the why, since everyone is gonna say, yeah, of course, it's a fact. No need to talk about it. It's secure. Then people are gonna say, yes, let's adopt it. It is secure, without knowing why, which is basically what happens with most technologies and everywhere.
Interesting, but we are not sure either. Like, we don't know who is Satoshi, and then maybe he can like appear at some point and dump all of his Bitcoin on the market, and then I don't know. Yeah, we will figure it out. That it's God knows.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the appearance of Satoshi, if ever it ever happens, will be like you will be like an electric shock to the market, but it will not disrupt, in my humble opinion, the way the network is being, managed, right? Because it's gonna be their influence. Let's put it this way: whoever is Satoshi Nakamoto will be more like an influencer way rather than an actual enforcer of change, right? So it would be interesting.
There were like news just recently that Russia is starting to use Bitcoin for international trade. And then there were like rumors that just to stop them, Ukraine will try to do like a 51 attack on Bitcoin,
Right.
or like the 51% attack.
Yes.
I don't know. Like these are definitely like interesting times that we are living in, because obviously, like you could probably like tell more about like how is it life in a country where there is actually like a conflict going on.
Right.
But if we are like shifting towards like a third world war, then
Yeah.
then then it's not just gonna be fought on the land and by
Right.
drones, but by money as well.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And like in wars, and especially if it's a world war, I mean, like rules won't apply necessarily, right? Like the rules that we're used to follow and build our societies around will not necessarily apply anymore, right? So definitely, for me, self custody is important, because as long as there is internet, there is Bitcoin. And internet today, basically, if it stops of to exist, let's say, like in a very hypothetical, unrealistic scenario, not only would Bitcoin stop from working, it's not going to disappear, because the moment internet is back on, the network is back on as well. So there is no disappearance of Bitcoin, right? But not only would the Bitcoin network would be disrupted, but the whole world would be disrupted. Communication, banking, everything. So it would be like much more than a problem specific to Bitcoin. It would be a world problem that is far-fetched, in my opinion. And
yeah.
it remains a must to actually have at least some allocation to an asset like Bitcoin in self-custody specifically, that is secure by something, a tool, a hardware like VaultKi, in order to make sure that the moment something happens, we are still able to cater for our most basic needs, especially when talking about, regions of conflict. And there is one anecdote story about that Ukrainian person back, when the war started there, who actually flew away from Ukraine and was able, in a neighboring country, I forget which one specifically, to actually survive for quite a while, given that he had access to his crypto wallet. Right? Because the moment the war started, banks also stopped from, giving cash out to their clients, to their Ukrainian clients. So whoever had still wallets and cryptos on wallets in a decentralized way had access to their money. So obviously, Bitcoin fixes it, or fixes this, and this could be so many things, including the urgency in a time of war or time of conflict.
Yeah, like I have a couple of Ukrainian friends who actually like ran Bitcoin mining companies in Ukraine, and the companies are actually still running.
Oh,
So,
really?
but they are not like half of their family are not in the country anymore. So at least that is like keeping them kind of safe. So if you are coming from like a traditional financial background, like do you have, or do you see like anything that like from a financial or like a traditional financial perspective could improve on Bitcoin?
So I mean that I think that there are a lot of do's and don'ts, if I may say, but the don'ts in this case are much more important than the do's. What I mean by that is that there is no one system that is completely flawed. There is no one innovation that is completely bad or good, right? There are always different aspects of it, and oftentimes the use of it by us makes it good, better, or worse, right? Now, our financial system, unfortunately, the traditional one, does not have enough limits, if I may say, to actually manipulation or bad actors or bad regulations. So eventually we end up having, going into a downward spiral until we hit the bottom and everything, collapses. So in order to avoid that, adopting a currency like Bitcoin that is already programmed to actually mitigate those kind of risks, whether it is like third-party risk, whether it is like central bank, manipulation and money printing, without limits, having that kind of, tool, which is Bitcoin asset, is there to be taken advantage of and adopted. And it takes a kind of unlearning to learn, if I may say. So we need to unlearn the traditional way of thinking to be able to learn Bitcoin. It's not a natural evolution, right? It's not like you just build on the older system to actually adopt Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's completely like trying to stop thinking in a centralized way and being more, open to learning a very different way of thinking, which is completely decentralized.
Yeah, like we definitely need, like, especially here in Europe, we are like so comfortable with our banking systems that we would need like a complete wipeout, or like we would need some trouble with the banks in order to actually like try to look for some kind of alternative, because we are definitely like very spoiled when it comes to money in the bank. And then yeah.
So that's the thing. So we oftentimes look for convenience, and whatever worked in the past, we consider that it's going to work in the future. But it's not necessarily the case, right? And we experienced that in Lebanon. And Lebanon did not adopt like a financial system or economic system that is unique to Lebanon, right? It's what everybody's using or adopting around the world, but with some other extremes or with some other components of higher corruption, mismanagement, etc. But eventually, the system is the same. So what I tend to say is that with the collapse, a lot of people say that Lebanon is 50 years behind. And my answer is that unfortunately, we're 15 years ahead, but in the collapse. So what happened to us is eventually bound to happen to many other countries. So Lebanon is more like a message. Lebanon is the best case or use case for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the solution. So let's not, discard or, let's learn from it.
Yeah, like for example, just the other day, like someone told me this analogy that, for example, like in Europe, many of the companies, they were like keeping the landlines, like the phone landlines, in use, and then it was like a slower mobile phone adoption because the companies had interest in it.
Right.
And in Africa, like they completely skipped the landlines and they went straight into mobile phones.
Right.
So I think in this case, I'm kind of afraid, or like not afraid, but I feel like that Europe is going to be left behind because of this difference in interest for the bigger companies. But we definitely like see like smaller startups like popping up in the space. Do you have like any, I don't know, advice to entrepreneurs who want to enter into Bitcoin or like Bitcoin security?
Well, honestly, I think that since it's an industry that is being created right now, right? It's not like an already established industry that is clear. Like we're navigating in unknown seas, so we don't know eventually where things are going to go. And oftentimes, regulations that are imposed by governments will, direct the industry itself. Whether we like it or not, it's a fact. We might not completely abide by it when it does not, completely suit us or suit our ethos, but it's there. What I would say is that we need to remain nimble, to adapt, to stay always well informed, to always put the effort where it's worth it. Because we're still not aware of what will be created, right? It's not like we know eventually that this will happen and it's just, a matter of time. We don't even know what will happen. But we know that something will happen that is so disruptive, then the whole system is going to change. So staying nimble, starting somewhere where we feel we have a competitive advantage, we have a story to tell, we have a message, because, the Bitcoin space for me is more than just, a place where that is up and coming and where one can make a viable business and money. But it's also a mission, if I may say. It's also something that, we feel comfortable to abide by. We're not doing, against our own convictions. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting way to do so, to see how it evolves, to contribute to it. And staying nimble is the name of the game.
Is there any project that you are like keeping an eye on, or like you're excited to see, like how is it evolving?
Honestly, I'm mostly monitoring the projects around self-custody, because we're seeing how, there is a lot of risk around self-custody. What if you lose your seed phrase? What if you have access? What about inheritance? There are a lot of things that are being done. Still nothing that is completely, on point and like the obvious solution that will disrupt every other solution, or like, but keeping an eye on that specific part of the industry that once will be mature and well built. I think everything from here on will be easier and built upon it. So this is why, like, the crypto journey starts with custody, right? So we start with that.
Actually, like first I would like to ask you to recommend us some wallets that is like the most secure in your point of view at the moment. And also secondly, like I'm really, really interested about inheritance. So for example, right now, like if I die, then
God forbid.
I mean, like, God forbid, like, obviously, like, I'm not even close to it, hopefully, but yeah, let me knock on wood. But, like, in general, like, if that happens,
Yeah.
no one has access to my crypto.
Right.
Like, what do they do?
Right.
Because even if I share, for example, like, my seed phrase with my mom, 2 minutes later, she is going to forget it. She will
Right.
not know, like, what to do with it. So.
Right. Right. So this is where I would say that today, first you have the single seed phrase self custody setup and the multi signature setup, right? Single signature and multi signature. Now, single signature is always more risky, whether it is from when we're still around and after, we're not around anymore. It's always more risky. Having a multi sig setup is always better. Now, the multi-sig setup can be done at our level or at an institutional level, in the sense that either we can create our own setup whereby we create, let's say, 2 out of 3, like a multi-sig wallet with 2 out of 3 keys necessary to actually, move the assets or sign transactions. And then we just, separate those 3 keys with 3 people that we trust, with clear guidelines as to how to access, what to do, what not to do, right? So this is one way. But as you said, if we don't have around us people who are knowledgeable enough to actually do what's necessary once something bad happens, then we're in a difficult spot. And this is where we could move away from that specifically and go to something that is more collaborative custody, right? So either through apps that allows you to, but this is where also we should, trust the app itself, that allows you to split your seed phrase, or to have a multi-sig kind of setup, or have a multi-institutional custody, meaning that you would talk to a company that allows you to create your own wallet with 3 keys, same setup, 2 out of 3 keys, but each key would sit with a different company that are specialized in the custody of seed phrases. Meaning that if anything happens to you or anyone, God forbid, the Inheritance is much easier because, whoever is inheriting could eventually approach the company and the company would walk them through the process after making sure that, they're actually the beneficial owners, etc. So it's a way, it's costly because it's like a recurring kind of payments, right? It's not like a one-time payment where you buy your secure, metal seed tray storage like VaultKi, you distribute them in several keys and then you're good. It's not a one-time investment, it's a recurring investment. So it depends on how much investment you have and how much you're willing to pay for that kind of service.
So, for example, like with VaultKi, if I buy like your product and then like something happens, then previously, like I educate, like for example, like I don't know, one of my cousins, like okay, like after I'm gone, you need to look for this.
Right. So in the case of VaultKi, the setup would be in two ways. The first one would be if you want to have one key, since you can split it, you can give two halves to two different persons. So at not one point in time does anyone can actually take control of the wallet. So that is one way of doing it, while you keep the full key to yourself. Right? If something happens, they can always coordinate together. The second one is obviously multi-signature wallets, and with multi-sig comes more than one seed phrase. More than one seed phrase means you have the need for many VaultKis.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea.
Yeah. So having more than one key, right? Put on 3 VaultKis, let's say, each VaultKi being split in two. So your risk of losing your seed phrase is really, really minimized. And then you have to obviously give those keys to different persons who themselves have two halves that they can split. So there is always a proper way to actually divide the risk of loss or theft. But it requires obviously some, a proper process, a clear process, so that nothing falls between the cracks. At the end of the day, it's self-custody. You're counting on yourself. You're not counting on, a third-party company or somebody else. Right? So there is with great power comes great responsibility. So this is where the responsibility lies.
Heavy is the crown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I can actually see how this is could work out. For example, leaving a will behind and then splitting, having a multi-sig wallet, having crypto in it, but then, for example, acquiring a couple of VaultKis and then splitting it between your friend group, for example, and then no one knows who has the other part of it.
For example.
And then
that could be a way to do it eventually. Or eventually also putting one VaultKi at the bank, one VaultKi with your lawyer who's responsible of the succession plan, and one VaultKi with you, right? So nobody has access to the bank before the owner passes. Then the lawyer won't be able to enforce anything or enact anything without either the bank's key or the owner's key. So there is always this diversification that allows you to split the risk and not have anyone have access to your wallet before inheritance needs to take place.
Yeah, that's really a great note to end on. So
let's look at it in a different way. Until then, gonna have a lot of, I hope, tailwind. We have a lot of good runway for Bitcoin. There's a lot of innovation that will be created. A lot of things that we didn't even think of today will take place. Thus, the nimble part and to adapt, and then we'll see how things evolve. It could be much faster than we think, and we need to adapt.
So, if you could improve one aspect of global Bitcoin adoption instantly, with just a snap of a finger,
Right.
What would it be?
I think that even adopters today, or some adopters today, are adopting Bitcoin for the wrong reasons. So if I could, in a push of a button, create that kind of awareness around Bitcoin so that it is adopted for the right reasons rather than being a get rich quickly tool or asset, but rather really a long-term investment that keeps and retains value, that is deflationary, that is secure, like the real offering of Bitcoin rather than, just as speculative assets, which a lot of people are actually adopting Bitcoin for. I think that would be the better way. And it will be much, much healthier for the industry to develop, because a lot of money is going towards developing just tools for these people who just want to speculate. They want to cater for those needs. And you can see that with a lot of content online. A lot of YouTubers and a lot of influencers just like give you content with to the moon and other flashy statements, which basically do not touch upon the real, core of Bitcoin and ethos of Bitcoin. So if I could do something, it would be more like, try to remove that and enforce more of the, true essence and ethos of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we need to still tackle. In a sense, do you have like any influencers or like any content creator that you follow in the space and then it's like giving valuable information?
Yes, of course. So we all do, I think, but I tend to just drop any of those who are just, doing those kind of statements, the flashy ones, and retain those who are, really insightful. One of them would be obviously like the one and only Michael Saylor. Like he's been really the advocate for Bitcoin that was first honest enough to say that, yes, I used to be a skeptic, now follow me. And he's been very active in that sense, being very aggressive as well, implementing what he's preaching. So, and his credibility is still there because whatever is he's saying is actually something that is convincing, So Michael Saylor is one of them. And this is on the Bitcoin side. I'm not going to name them all, but like another one that is more on this security side would be Jameson Lopp. I really like, his content. He is like very insightful. He's an expert in the field of security. And actually also they have their own app that they're developing right now. I don't know if I should give the name or not, but that is really interesting also to look into. And another one who is like a big influencer would be Andres Antonopoulos. Like obviously, these are the big boys. These are the guys that are really like know Bitcoin in its core, right? They're not advocating for something they don't understand to the most, the smallest detail. So it's always insightful to follow them and to take, good ideas and to be inspired from.
So George, if like our viewers want to follow you or want to like check out your products or what you're working on, where can they do that?
Yeah, sure. So you have the website, obviously. So it's VaultKi.com, VaultKi being written VaultKi.com. And you have also with the same handle, VaultKi, on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and other social media. So yeah, obviously they can also reach out whenever they need to, whether it's through DM or online through the contact us form, and would be more than happy to give them the information they need.
Yeah, we will link everything in the description below if they want to reach out to the we kind of like try to make it easy.
Of course.
So George, thank you so much for this amazing conversation and also for your contribution in terms of Bitcoin security and the educational line of VaultKi as well. Like I know that we just need to make this happen in one country.
Yeah.
and then the rest will follow the suit. And I'm very happy that you are one of the warriors for this fight.
Thank you very much. So much. Thank you very much for inviting me, Barbara. It was really very nice meeting you and meeting the team actually at Bitcoin MENA in Abu Dhabi not long ago. So hopefully we'll have many more encounters like these in the future.
Thanks for tuning in to Bitcoin Kebab, the podcast by Bitcoin.